60. If you wonder what that meant, my wife asked me a question, what my battery was at on my phone because it didn't charge last night, and it's at like 60, 70% because I wirelessly charged it a little while ago. Gotta love phone problems, right? Because that's the real world. Good morning. Welcome. Nobody's on yet, but that's the best way to start a Facebook Live is with your wife going, how much battery do you have on your phone? And I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully enough to get through. Otherwise, it's going to be a really short conversation, right? So, this morning, I actually, I've had a crazy full week, and big giant proposal that was supposed to be due Friday at work. Every night this week, I was scheduled to be at church working with either, you can make more noise than that, baby. So I was scheduled to be at church working either doing sound, which is one of those things that I've done for a long, long time, and or working with our college group that my wife and I are blessed to lead. So Sunday I worked at church. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think I'm off today technically. I'm back tomorrow morning, and then Monday we both leave to go on the high school road trip. Our son will be a freshman this year, first time attending the high school road trip to Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We're taking almost 100 high school students to Gatlinburg. Not just the two of us. There are more adults than the two of us. But we've been blessed to be asked to be a part of that. And I think that kind of ties in with what I want to talk about a little bit this morning. It's not probably as deep as some of the other conversations that I tend to have, but this one is, I think, just imperative to how we are seen and how we honestly just thrive as people, not just Christians, because Christian's kind of a small filter, I think, for my life. I'm much more than a Christian, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. The Christian aspect of my life is something that's all-encompassing, but at the same token, that's a kind of a worldly filter on something that's much, much bigger. Being in Christ, that is all-encompassing. Christian is the society's filter for who I am in Christ. Me in Christ is much, much, much bigger. And I kind of want to just talk about what that manifests in our real life about, and something that I've seen outside of the church, not just in a really westernized kind of evangelical traditional model, but even permeating to some degree into the grace community, and some of even the most prestigious and well-spoken and most identifiable leaders and theologians in that regard. And so it's just something that I think is so important to be mindful of, and so wonderful to focus on, because when we focus on it, or when we're aware of it, let me rephrase that, we impact the world in a way that we cannot. I mean, we could articulate and philosophize all we want, but if we don't have this one key component, all of it's kind of moot, because everything falls flat. I want to start this morning talking about the fruits of the Spirit. They're actually right there next to my head. A friend of ours gave that to us for Christmas a couple years ago, and it's a really cool little art piece, wall piece, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I'm gonna turn around and read them. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the fruits of the Spirit. Those are the things that start to manifest once we become aware of our spirit, and I allow our spirit to connect intimately in this union with Christ, who we are in. And as we become aware of that union, those things organically start to just overflow from us, if we're doing it right, I guess, so to speak. Not that there's a right way or a wrong way, but just those are the fruit that we should see if Christ is really in us. He would exemplify all of those. He does exemplify all of those in Scripture and now in our lives through us. I think they're important in order, too, in a way. I don't get hung up on the order too much, but love being first. Unless we become aware that God is love, period. That Christ is the exact representation of God, and God's mercy endures forever. Covers everything. That the cross was the most beautiful expression of love that has ever existed on earth, we can't even begin to have the other ones. And I think that's kind of indicative, if we're not careful, of much of the modern day church. Much of the modern day church is scared of God being that loving, to be honest. And, they want God to have just an equal amount or just a smidge less or maybe a smidge more of justice in the regard of legalistic holiness. And so love and holiness are kind of on a scale, and if they don't balance, then God's not true to who God is. And God's holiness is an expression of his love, is what I'm convinced of. I'm convinced of it. And I think the fruits of the Spirit is a perfect way of seeing that. Because unless we get love, unless we connect with love on an intimate level and understand that is God's primary characteristic. John said it twice back to back. God is love. God is love. Then once we grab that, the other fruits start to manifest in our life piece by piece. And the last one, I think it's ironic. The last one, it's maybe not ironic, it's just truth, is self-control. See, self-control is kind of the last thing we might even get. And that makes sense, right? Because we're all broken, jacked up people. But if we can understand that we're loved, regardless of our self-control, we start getting the other things. And this morning, I just want to talk about the second one. Because once we start to taste, to bite into this tree of life fruit of love, right, we get joy. We get joy. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit and reference a weird story. You've heard the verse likely if you've been in church at all. Maybe you haven't. But there's a verse that the joy of the Lord is my strength. And it comes from the Old Testament, Old Covenant, right? And it's in the chapter of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah was the cupbearer for Artaxerxes. And I'm not 100% historically aligned here, but just to give you an idea of who Xerxes would have been, Artaxerxes. If you've ever seen the movie 300, I know, I'm a bad Christian, right? Because I've seen the movie 300. It's a really cool war film, and it's really gory, and it's kind of arty and, I don't know, artsy-fartsy. It's cool. But Xerxes is the king in there, and he thinks himself a god, and he's just a really evil, gross dude. Anyway, make a long story short, that's kind of the image that Artaxerxes would have had too. These were larger-than-life, godlike human beings, or at least they considered themselves, who had, kind of free reign over their empires. And the Persian Empire would have been the dominant force in the world at this period of time. And the nation of Israel was confined inside this nation of Persia and were basically enslaved or oppressed to another degree. This was a continuing and reoccurring theme, whether it was Egypt, whether it was Persia, whether it was Babylon, whether it was Rome or the Greeks, always at the always underfoot was the nation of Israel. And here they are. They're under the foot of Artaxerxes, Persia. Nehemiah, however, is a Hebrew. He's a Jew, and he's been elevated to the most trusted position inside of all of the Persian Empire, the cupbearer to the king. And the reason this is the most important is he basically had to validate that no one would poison the king by bringing him his cup of wine. So this is an extremely prestigious position. All right? And anyway, make a long story really short. He basically is told by God that he's going to be the one to go rebuild the temple or rebuild the wall around Jerusalem and thus the temple and start the reconstruction of the Jewish structure of faith, if you will, going back to the Moses law. All right, so here we are, chapter 8. He's gone through this horrible process, but very life-giving process of rebuilding the wall. The wall's rebuilt. He's done it in the face of oppression. He's done it in the face of resistance. He's overcome all these unbelievable things with God's help. And now he's there with his new nation of Israel. He's got a priest. He's got the Levites, all the things needed to really start the process of being a community of people who understand or believe they understand who God is. and they're going to read the law for the first time in generations. They're going to read the law for the first time in generations. And so the guy gets up on a platform, and this is found in Nehemiah chapter 8. He gets up on a platform and he starts reading the law. All right? And then it gets really funny because somewhere in verse 8 or so, it says, they read from the book of law, making it clear and giving meaning so the people understood what was being read. That's probably the most important verse in this entire thing. I'll say it again. They read from the book of the law, law of God, making it clear and giving meaning so that the people understood what was read. It goes on to say, then Nehemiah the governor, Ezra the priest and teacher of law, and the Levites who were instructing the people said to them, this is a day is holy to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep, for all the people had been weeping as they listened to the words of the law. Now, okay, that's where I was trying to get. So these people are hearing the law for the first time. They're like, do this, don't do this, you haven't been doing this, you haven't been doing this, don't lie, honor God, no other gods, all the do's and don'ts. And they're like, right? They're like, we can't do that. We haven't been doing this. God's got to be ticked off at us. I mean, they're weeping. They're broken people now hearing the law for the first time and hearing how far away they've been separated from God or their belief of God based on the law. But again, go back to that key verse. Go back to that key verse. And those people were giving the meaning so that they understood what was being read. See, the law is not about the law. We don't discover that really till after Christ. But I got a feeling that the teachers here at Nehemiah's time were super wise and had a little bit of an insight. This law, hey guys, listen, we gotta understand the law is not about the law. It's about God and his favor and love for us. It's his favor and love for us is the law. The law is not given in some sort of punitive, sacrificial, do it or else way. It's hey, if you follow this, you will know a life of love that's beyond your own comprehension. And so then it says, for all the people, right, and going back and saying this, had been weeping as they listened to the words of the law. But check this out. Then Nehemiah said, and this is in verse 10, chapter 8 of Nehemiah, go and enjoy choice food and sweet drinks, and send some of those who have nothing to those who have nothing. This day is holy to our Lord. Do not grieve, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. The Levites calmed all the people, saying, be still, for this is a holy day. Do not grieve. Then all the people went away to eat and drink and send portions of food to celebrate with great joy, because now they understood the words that had been made known to them. You see, the law is not something we need to be like all upset and freaked out about. No, in the law, we find love. And when we focus on love and we understand that the law, even back then, was pointing us to love, guess what the next thing we get is? I'm going to go back here, right? I think it's love, joy. We get joy. We get to have a party with food and sweet drink. Now, I'm not a legalist, and I'm pretty confident that meant adult beverages. I'm just throwing it out there. They had a party, and they invited even the people that probably didn't belong to the party or couldn't afford to be at the party. They said, come on, we got a cooler full. We got extras. Come on in. There's stuff on the barbecue. Probably not pork because they were Jewish, but come on in. Let us share with you what we don't have. This is the whole point of the law, is to love one another as yourself, just like Jesus said. You know, Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? Love God with all that you are and love your neighbor as yourself. It's all wrapped up in that. Psalm has a pretty interesting thing, because if we focus on God being hung up and angry toward us, we can never understand his love for us. And Psalm chapter 30, verse 4 and 5 says this: sing to the Lord, all you godly ones. Praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only for a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. And again, this is totally prophetic. is totally prophetic, because in the span of human history, God's perceived anger lasted only for a moment. But once we have the morning, once we have the revelation that Christ was exactly who he said he was, the perfect representation of the Father, and the Father is now revealed and manifested in full unveiled beauty to humanity, right? As love, as walking grace, as walking mercy, as walking forgiveness. Not really worried about what we do, but who we are and our awareness of who we are in him. Once that's unveiled to us, now we get joy. We have joy comes in the morning. The morning is here, guys and gals. The morning is here now. We don't have to, we're not in the dark anymore. We have been enlightened. We have been lightened with joy. So let's walk in it. Joy actually means, if you look at the Greek word for joy, it means properly the awareness of God's grace. That's where we get joy. When we are aware of the love and grace and mercy that God has for us, we can't help but to be excited in everything we do, even if we have a crap week full of writing proposals and, just doing things that sometimes are hard and stuff. Paul wrote some crazy things we're going to find out here in the middle of a prison, probably like waist deep in human filth. And he's going to write these things. We'll see this in just a second. Jesus, same kind of thing, is carrying a cross, whipped, beaten, inches away from death, carrying his cross. And it says in Hebrews 12:2, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. See, Jesus, he wasn't focused on the pain of the moment. He was focused on the joy that sat before him, because he knew the love that was being expressed of the Father in him and through him on the cross, absorbing all of our perception of sin and shame and guilt, absorbing in violence. He bore all of that on the cross, and then he killed it, and he rose again, completely lifting all those things off our shoulders forever. Guys, we are totally free. And it's going to sound again, I'm crazy, so it sounds crazy, but we are totally free to walk in sin and still be loved. Now, the ironic or the paradoxical thing that comes out of this is, once we understand that even in our addictions, even in our brokenness, even in our jacked upness, that we are loved and forgiven, all that stuff sheds off us like water off a duck's back. We don't long to do that anymore because we're free from it and we know we're loved. See, I think so much of what happens to people, and I'm probably a walking testament of this, is the hint of shame, the hint of guilt, the hint of belief that we are somehow broken beyond what God can fix. It is really what sparks that reoccurrence of pain and suffering in our life. But if we can understand that even in that brokenness, God's doing it with us. I'm not an addict, so I'm going to use an addict thing, but God is injecting drugs into your system with you. God's cutting you in pain. God's looking at pornography with you. Whatever it is, God is in that with you. And when you understand that, and he's not condemning you in any way when you do that, he's breaking with you. He's broken with you. He's on the cross hurting with you, and you're with him in that. And when you can start to understand it, that there's no condemnation in any one of those things, none. And none of those things separate you from the love that he has for you. In fact, he loves you so much, he will endure them with you. Man, they start to fall off you because you get so joyful that a God would be that amazing, that would be that invested in your life, that he will let you go to those ends to know his love. He will let you go to those ends. He will let you to do those things to understand that there is no barrier separation between you and he at all. And that's what Jesus came to reveal. It's good stuff, guys. I want to close with this because Paul was a walking testimony of this. Paul was a walking testimony on, and once you start to understand this was Paul's filter, you just can't help but to read his words in this way. Paul was in prison when he wrote these words. He wrote these words in Philippians 4. And it just says, I celebrate God all day, every day. I mean, I revel in him. Now, Paul is in prison, beaten, abused, in his own filth. This is what he's writing. I celebrate God every day. I revel in him. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you are on their side, working with them and not against them. Help them see that the master is about to arrive. He could show up at any minute. Your life is but a blip. It's the moment, right? Understand that moment, you might see God as being angry with you. No, his mercy endures forever. He says, goes on in verse 6, don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, just pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. Summing it all up, friends, I say to you to do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious. The best, not the worst. The beautiful, not the ugly. The things to praise and the things not to curse. Put into practice what you've learned from me, what you've heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up by saying is, I think as a community of Jesus followers, we tend to sometimes forget this. I'm just going to be honest, and I do too. I'm preaching to myself. I can only see myself on this thing, and I need to focus on what's pure and good, and I know there's jacked up bad stuff in this world, always, and it's really easy to kind of even point a finger and say, hey, we need to do better, guys. We need to feed the hungry more. We need to do this more. We got and yeah, those things are good and those things are needed, but, and I'm going to put the but on there. But if we're doing them out of any sense of self-righteous obligation to God and what he wants in this world, then we're doing it for the wrong reasons. If we're doing them because we've been loved first, and it's an overflow of that, and we're doing them in joy, like we give even at church. If we feel like there's an obligation behind giving, it's not giving. It's just a reaction to law. But if we're doing out of the great joy because we've been first given, man, it changes everything. So focus on love, focus on the tree of life, focus on the fact that there's nothing you can do to be separated from God's love, and joy will start to permeate through your soul, and you'll start to see like a bad situation, but you'll start to see the good in it. You'll see the bad person, but you'll see the image of God. That you'll see Christ himself in the eyes and brokenness of that person, and the redemption that is going to be manifested in that life. That changes everything. When you can even look at the most broken among us and understand that they are absolutely reflecting, they're reflective of the Spirit of God. They just don't know it yet. And we can walk alongside them and say, there is no condemnation. There is nothing inside of you that can ever escape love. How can I love you? How can I love you? And allow you in your brokenness to realize and become awakened to the fact that there is nothing that you're doing here that is loving to yourself or to others. And that is the most wonderful revelation that anybody can have. And that's what's going to produce joy. That's what's going to produce joy. So, hope that was pretty good this morning. I felt good. It's weird because I'm talking and I don't know if anybody's listening. So have a great morning. I love you guys so much. Pray, if you will, with us. Just that God's good, and that there is an awakening of hearts and lives and young people who become just enlightened and excited about what God's doing and who he's made them to be on this road trip. So we got a lot of young college students who are going kind of as leaders even, which is exciting to see young people leading young people. And, I saw something this morning. I'll close. I say I close with this like 6 times on these. That just talked about how, this young generation is so evil. No, they're not. They're just blind to their own identity. That's all it is. And we can come alongside them and tell them, hey, there is no condemnation in anything that you've done. And
the more that they know their love, the more they will become love, and the more that they will become all those fruits of the Spirit. We'll start seeing it manifest everywhere. That's what's going to happen. We don't really have a choice in it. It is reconciled. It's finished. We're just in the process of it from our own state. But God's beginning to end has made it good. It's all good, as we just read in Philippians. So love y'all, and have a wonderful day. All right, take care.